What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Kilo Loco here, and we are about to cover Progress, aka NSProgress. Now, if you're not familiar with this object, go ahead and take a guess what it does. But Progress is an object that you can use to track your progress, essentially. Let's say that you're doing some type of you're running some type of function, or you're doing some type of work in your app, and what you want to do is you want to see like how far along has it come, how where is it at in its process, how much progress has it made. And essentially what that will do is it allows you to essentially show that visually if that's something that you want. It kind of like when you're doing like a search on the internet and you see that the website is loading and at the top it has like the progress bar. Well, you could use something like Progress in order to track that progress, not the visual element, but the actual data. So let's go ahead and jump in. The first thing that we're going to do is we're just going to go over progress in general, just basic progress. So let's go ahead and create a progress object, and then let's talk about it. All right, so right here, as you can see, we have an instance of a progress object, and we use the initializer called total unit count. So what we need to do is we need to specify how many units of work is inside of this total progress. Are there 10 units of work? Are there 100 units of work? How many units of work are you counting? Maybe there's only 3 units of work. So, at stage 1, you would complete this thing. So that's 1 unit. Stage 2, you complete that unit. And then when you finish up that stage 3, you have 3 units. So right here, I'm just saying that we have 10 units of work that need to be completed before it's done. You could also put like 100 if you want to think about like 100%. You can do that too. So now, how do we actually implement this into our work? How do we implement it into a function to track its progress? So let's go ahead and create a function where it's going to essentially just loop through. It's going to loop through. It's going to sleep for a second, and then it's going to say, oh, we completed this unit of work. So let's go ahead and add that right now. So as you can see right here, we just have this function called do something, keeping it nice and simple. And we have this for in loop right here. So we have for I in an array of just numbers of 1 to 10. So it's an array that has 10 numbers in it, 1 through 10. And then we're just looping through that. So, we're going to go in, we're going to check if the progress is canceled. This is one thing that you want to keep in mind when you're working with Progress or NSProgress, whatever, is that you always want to check if the progress is canceled before you do the next unit of work. Because if it's canceled, then you need to kind of stop right there and not continue to do work, or else it's just going to keep going, and essentially it won't cancel your process. So yeah, so you always want to check if the progress is canceled before you do your next unit of work. So to represent our work, I'm going to just sleep for 1 second. Let's say that our work takes 1 second. Right? Our work is going to take 1 second to complete. Maybe it's like image processing or whatever it is. And then after we have completed that unit of work, we're going to move on to this next line where it says progress.completed completed unit count. And all we're going to do is we're going to pass in the I right here. So since we're just keeping it simple and we're looping through, the first time it's just going to be the completed unit count is going to be 1, then it's going to be 2, all the way up until 10. And since 10 is the same number right here, when we hit 10, it's going to be essentially completed. So just keep that in mind, that we're counting all the way up until this number if we're only working with one progress, which we currently are. So once we hit 10, it's going to be completed. We'll hit 100%. Also keep in mind that completed unit count is an int64, just like up here, this is an int64 and so is this. So you do have to convert your numbers into int64s to show the completed work. And if we wanted to monitor this progress, all we would have to do is just print out the fraction completed. So that will give us like a decimal of how much is completed in between 0 and 1. All right, so now that we're pretty much just going to print out the progress every time we go through this loop, we're going to see a number in between 0 and 1. So let's go ahead and run this and do something. All right, here we go. And we're getting 1, 2, or 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, 0.5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, right? So then when it hits 10, that's essentially completed. And it's not going to go anymore because we're just going through 1 through 10. So now it's completed, and we're getting that 1.0. So essentially we've completed all of our progress. We did 10 units of work in this array, and that happens to line up with the amount of total units to complete, or total unit count. And essentially we get 1, which is 100%. Now you could have made this 11, you could have made it whatever you wanted, a number that's bigger than that, and it would keep going. It would go up to, it would just go over. But it doesn't really make sense when you're working with progress to have like 110%, 200%. Like in all honestly, there's only 100%. You could you can only do in between 0 and 1. Honestly, like if you really think logically about something in between 1 and 100%, or 0 and 100%, right? So just try to keep that in mind. So this is basically how you just track progress. So now what we want to do is, let's say, well, we want to track progress for multiple objects and keep track of that total progress. We don't want to just have one progress. We want to have several different tasks that are doing each of these different things that combine to make one overall task completed. Well, there's two ways that you could do this. You could either do it implicitly or explicitly. So let's go ahead. I'm going to comment this out, and then we're going to start doing a progress starting out implicitly. All right, so I went through, I added two functions that are going to represent two different tasks of work. And what we have is our total progress. We have work 1 and then work 2. So this is very similar to what we did up here, where we had progress and then it had a total unit count of 10. This time I'm just going to say 100 because I'm going to consider it to be like 0 to 100%. It just keeps things easier. We could have done 10. It would have been perfectly fine to work with 10, especially in an example. But 100 is just a nice round number, so we use 100. So yeah, we have our total progress, and then we have this task that we're going to run, and it's doing the same exact thing as up here when we did do something. We're creating another progress inside. That's the only difference, is that we're creating like a sub progress or a child progress. It's going to be its own progress essentially. And what we're doing is we're looping through the units. So we have an array of 1 through 5, and then we're going to check if this first progress is canceled. Then we're going to sleep. So once again, this is going to represent us doing work. And then we're going to set our completed unit count for this first progress. Once again, we're only working with this right here, and we're setting it to whatever I is. So once it hits 5, since we only have a total unit count of 5 tasks or 5 different units of work to complete, theoretically, then once it hits 5, it will hit 100%. So this first progress will hit 100%. And then down here, all we're doing is we're printing out our child progress every time it goes through the loop. And we're also going to be printing out our total progress as it goes through the loop. And as you can see, it's just showing the fraction completed, which is once again that 0 point whatever number in between 0 and 1, kind of representing a percentage. And then the terminator is just simply saying put a line break in between each of these print statements. All right, and then work 2, we're doing exactly the same thing as work 1. We just called it something different, second progress. It still only has 5 units of work to complete. We're doing 1 through 5, checking it to make sure that it's not canceled. The sleep, once again, representing our unit of work. And then we're setting that second progress to whatever this I is in the loop. So what we need to do now is we actually need to make sure that both of these progress are kind of connected to our total progress, so that when we run work 1 and work 2, they are actually updating the total progress as well. So let's go ahead and do that right now. All right, so as we can see, I created another function called StartTasks. What this is going to do is the overall purpose of this function is to simply call work 1 and work 2. Anything else is essentially extra. So everything else is mainly for our progress. Now, as you can see, we're accessing our total progress, which once again up here has a total unit count of 100, right? So when I say become current, there is a current progress that is kind of in the background. It's kind of like accessing a singleton of the current progress. So there's a progress singleton that's available, and essentially what you're saying is this total progress is you're setting this total progress to be that the value of that singleton progress. I know it's a little bit weird, but this is why this isn't essentially the ideal way. The next way is going to be more ideal. But so we are setting our singleton progress to our total progress, which is just the main progress, become current progress, right? And then we're saying how much work is this worth compared to our total progress. So as you can see, I put 50, and I'm doing that because I'm saying 50. This total work that is about to happen, work 1 right here, is half of this total unit count 100. So whatever is going to happen next is going to be considered half of what my total progress. So work 1 is going to be considered 50, or it's going to count as 50 units or 50% of my progress. If this was 200, it would not mean that this is becoming worth 100 units. It's still only worth 50 units. So it would technically only be a quarter, if that makes any sense. So we're just saying, you know, out of the total units that are available for the total progress, how many units is this worth? And we're saying it's 50, therefore it's half of our 100. So then we go ahead and complete work 1, which is going to run through, and we only have a total unit of we only have the total unit count for our first progress as being worth 5 units. So those 5 units are going to translate to being essentially 50% of our total progress. I know that might seem a little bit confusing, but when I run through the example right now, it's going to clear up a little bit more. And then what we have to do is we have to resign current before we do this process essentially again for each of the different types of work that we're going to be doing. So once again, for work 2, we have to do total progress.become current, and then we're going to say this is also worth 50% of our total progress. We're going to run through it, and then we're going to resign the current. So let's go ahead and just start task, and I think this will start making a little bit more sense. So as you can see, all right, I didn't do the line breaks. Hold on one second. Alright, so the only change is that I'm going to print empty string just so that we get easy line breaks. So I'm going to go ahead and run this again, and let's take a look at it. So as you can see, we're going through and we're watching the child progress, and then we're also watching the total progress happen as it goes through. So you can see child progress 1, when it completes 1 unit of work, since there's only 5 units, you know, it's going to complete essentially 20% of this first progress. This first progress only has 5 units, so anytime it completes 1 unit of work, it's 20% of it. So as you can see, child 1 progress is going through, it's looping through, and then child 1 progress finishes. Once child 1 progress finishes, we're now moving on to child progress 2. And then child progress 2 is a completely new unit of progress. So every time it completes, it's also only going to complete 20%, since it also has a total units of 5. Now we can go ahead and change these numbers around, and it can complete different amounts, and that's what we're going to do right now. But before we do that, let's take a look at the total progress. What you see is whenever 1 unit of work gets completed for first progress, it's only worth 10%. And that's because, as you can see down here, once again, the work 1 is only going to be worth 50%, therefore, or it's only going to be worth 50 units, therefore it's half of our 100 units, and whenever we complete 1, it's going to be a total progress of 10%. Now, This is a lot of numbers, I know. I hope it's not too confusing, but let's take a look at what happens when I change the amount that the amount of units that each progress is worth. So let's say work 1 is more important. So we're going to say that it's worth 70% of our total progress, and work 2 is not as important, so it'll be worth 30%. Well, let's go ahead and run this one more time and take a look at how things change. So remember that the first progress and second progress are going to stay the same, because the amount of work to complete in the first progress is still only 5 units. Therefore, whenever you complete one, it's still only going to be worth 20%. However, when we take a look at the total progress that's completed, 1 unit of work is worth 14% for the first progress. So whenever we complete 1 unit in here in our child progress, for child 1 progress, it's going to be worth 14%. You can see that, and it's going up, and then when it completes, it's worth 70%. So once child 1 progress is at 100%, that's worth 70%. And you notice that, 70 is 70% of 100, right? So then when we start work 2 down here, you can see that doing 1 unit of work is, once again, still worth only 20% of the child progress itself. However, it's worth a lot more down here. So, or it's worth a lot less down here. So now you can see when it completes 1 unit of work for child 2, it's 76, then 82, then 88, then 94, until it finally completes and creates 100%. Hope this wasn't too confusing. I'm trying to explain it as much as I can, but I feel like the more that I explain it, the more confusing it becomes. But essentially, all it is that you want to make sure that your child progresses total up to the total progress. So you want these numbers right here, the 70, the 30, and you can choose however important they are to you, and they should equal this amount. The amount for the child progress, it doesn't really matter. You just specify how many units of work. You do the work step by step, and then you would increment through each step. It doesn't have to be a loop. If it's filtering something, then processing something, then you would increment at each of those steps. So I hope that makes sense. But this is how you would do it implicitly. I don't like this because it's kind of weird, like turning your total progress into the singleton current progress. That's kind of weird. So let's go through the explicit case where it makes a little bit more sense, and you can kind of see how these things are connected a little bit better. I'm going to comment this out, and then we'll start again with the explicit progress. All right, so let's go over doing things explicitly. Now, this is a better way to work with progress, and the reason for that is because it allows you to do things to have child progress that's asynchronous. You don't have to have it be synchronous, whereas implicit kind of makes it so that you have to have it synchronous. There can only be like 1 progress at a time. So explicit child progress is done very similarly. So once again, we have total progress up here at the top. I'm just going to set it to 100 units again. We're going to keep it as that easy 100%. And we're saying that child progress 1 has 5 units of work that it needs to complete before it's done. Same thing with child 2 progress. Work 1 is the same code as before up here in the implicit. We're just not putting the child progress inside of the function. We're actually holding a reference to that child progress, and then we're just updating it here in the work 1. So anytime a piece of work is completed, and we're also once again checking if it's canceled, then we're going to do our work, which is once again sleep for a second, and then we're going to set that progress equal to right here. And since there's only 5 units, each unit complete will be 20%. So we're just going to print out that information right here. We're going to do the same thing for work 2, same as above. And then as you can see right here, instead of using this whole entire weird thing that we did in the implicit where we had total progress dot become current, where it's using the singleton instance of the progress and making our total progress be that, we're just simply saying, hey, we have a total progress object and we want to add a child, which is going to be our child progress 1. And that child is going to be worth 50 units of work. So since once again, we have 100 units of work that needs to be completed, 50 units of work is just half. I hope that makes sense. And we're going to tweak these numbers in a second, but let's go ahead and see what happens when we run work 1 and work 2 and we start getting these printouts. Well, it'd probably help if I, called that function, right? Let's call that function, and here we go. So as you can see, it's printing out, and it's doing it just like it did before. It looks a little bit different because I have the progress 2 saying, instead of saying child 2 progress, it says child progress 2. So you have that number right next to it, but it's the same exact thing, right? So every unit of work for the child progress is going to be worth 20% because there's only 5 units, and then the total progress is going to be 10% of that. So I hope all that makes sense. Let's go ahead and tweak the numbers like we did last time, where we're saying that the total progress for child 1 is worth 70% of our work, and the total progress for 2 is worth 30%. So if we go ahead and run that one more time, you're going to see that once again the units of work for each child progress is going to stay the same, but the total amount of progress that's made for each unit being complete for that child progress is going to be different. So once again, total progress right here, 14, 28, so on and so forth. So when the child progress 2 is worth only 30%, and we start doing child progress 2, you see that the amount of total progress completely changes. All right, I had a little bit of a bug, so I had to go back and, that's what happens when you copy and paste, so we want to say child progress 2 right here in the work 2, not child progress 1, and child progress 2 right here in the work in the printout statement. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. Don't be copying and pasting. That's what happens, baby. All right, so now when we get down here to child progress 2 starting to print out, let's go ahead and expand that logging console. When you see that child progress 1 has completed 100%, that's going to be a total progress of 70% of our total progress, right? And then when child progress 2 starts, it's still doing 20% of work for itself, but it's worth 6% for each increment, and until we hit 100%, and then both of them are totaling 100%. So the last thing that I just want to go over is just canceling progress. Now, if we were to go ahead and say up here in work 1 that once we get to 20%, or once we get to the I is equal to 3. So if I is equal to 3, we're just going to cancel progress, like something happened at this moment in time, right? So what we could do is we could say total progress dot cancel, and what is going to happen is that it's going to cancel all progress. So total progress is going to cancel any child that it's going to cancel any progress inside of it's going to cancel any child progress to it. So as you can see, since we canceled total progress, since child progress 1 is a child of total progress, it actually cancels this process, and it makes sure that it's not continuing to work when it doesn't need to. So I think that's all we really need to go over. This was just to represent like some type of interruption, maybe the user, maybe something bad happened, I don't know, something broke. So that's how you would cancel. And this is progress in general. So I hope that this was helpful. I feel like I didn't explain it well enough, but this is something that you can implement into your progress into your project to track the progress of work. And if you need a further or more thorough explanation, go ahead and ask me to create another video. I might have to do another video to clear some of this stuff up if anything was too confusing. But yeah, this is how you would track progress in your app for any work that's being completed, and it can give you great information, especially if you're working with several subtasks. You can group all these tasks into subtasks, and then track all the progress individually and come up with a total progress. So it's a pretty cool thing to do, and it will allow you to start working with Progress View a lot more frequently if that's something that you're interested in. So that's going to be all for today. Hope you learned something new. This has been an interesting video for me, interesting topic to cover. But anyways, if you guys want to support, make sure you check out kilologo.com. Also, go ahead and pick up one of the awesome t-shirts that I sell, Code Passionately t-shirts. And then if you have any other topics that you want covered, make sure you leave those topics in the comments down below. And that's going to be all, guys. That's going to be all. Go out there, keep coding passionately.